Alright, it's time to take a look at another round of games that I think deserves some extra attention. And this time it's 8 single-player games I don't think you'll regret buying, and most of them recently released too. So if you're ready, put those sweaty feet up, lean back, and let's jump straight in. First up, we take a look at Clair Obscur Expedition 33, which is a turn-based combat game, but tries to keep you more involved with the actual outcome compared to similar games in the genre. You're still selecting abilities and attacks from a menu, but once you lock something in, you'll often need to aim it manually, time your blocks, or press a button to trigger an added effect. And the longer you play, the more the system leans into it, especially when enemies start layering on buffs or timing-based defenses that forces you to respond with precision. Each character of your party plays their specific role, but the game encourages you to think in sequences, like staggering enemies, syncing buffs, and linking abilities across turns. And since enemies can delay your moves or throw out status effects, you constantly need to plan ahead. You also deal with this Picto system, where you assign passive traits that can change things like how quickly certain actions charge, how characters generate resources, or how their effects interact over multiple turns. It's the kind of system you might half-ass at first, but eventually need to invest more time into when dealing with more complex enemy setups. Between battles, you'll mostly spend time exploring semi-open areas with optional side tracks. Some lead to puzzles, optional fights, or passive upgrades, while others might give you a heads-up on upcoming enemy mechanics. So if you usually skip turn-based games because they feel too slow or hands-off, this one puts more of the outcome in your hands. It's well-built, mechanically sharp, and a clear recommendation from my side. Next on the list is Drop Duchy, a Tetris-style roguelite that turns deck building into a kind of map-building puzzle. Instead of playing cards for actions, you're using them to drop terrain and structures onto a grid. The moment you place a tile, it's locked in, so you're constantly planning around limited space and future draws. And because everything depends on placement, the layout affects how well things actually run. Fields need space to expand, barracks function better near roads, and a single misplaced building can break your whole setup. And the same goes for combat units. Because it's not just about choosing the right counter, you also have to think about spacing, direction, and how long that unit's going to hold up once the fighting starts. Fights play out directly on the board, where swords beat arrows, arrows beat axes, and axes beat swords. But the outcome still depends on where units are placed and when they join the fight. And as runs go on, enemies start spawning straight onto your grid, blocking paths, jamming production, and forcing you to patch holes with whatever's in your hand. Each round draws from a limited deck, and you're constantly juggling military, economy, and board space. A weak hand doesn't just slow you down, it can open gaps that spiral into losses. Between runs, you unlock new cards, modifiers, and faction missions. Some of these tweak the rules, like rewarding tight defenses or pushing you to expand at the cost of frontline strength, so your strategy keeps shifting based on what you've unlocked. It's a game for those into strategy that rewards careful planning and smart positioning, as this one gives you a lot to work with, especially once the pressure starts stacking up. Let's move on to Avowed, Obsidian's first-person RPG set in the same world as Pillars of Eternity, where you're sent out to investigate a spreading plague that's warping both the land and the people caught in it. It's built on classic RPG foundations like branching quests, dialogue choices, and full character builds. But once you're in combat, it plays more like a hands-on brawler crossed with spellcasting. You can mix and match your loadout, whether it's a wand and sword or pistol and shield, and every weapon or spell has its own timing and purpose. Combat shift based on how you've built your setup and which path you've taken through the skill tree. And speaking of skill tree, you can lean into fast melee with dodge-based perks, go all in on elemental magic and burn through cooldowns, or mix in ranged tools that change how you move through combat. Most of the depth comes from how well your choices line up and complement each other. Most zones branch in multiple directions, and exploration is often rewarded with new abilities, better gear, or quests. For example, a side path might give you early access to a spell combo you wouldn't unlock otherwise, or reveal a conversation thread that recontextualizes a choice in the main story. Dialogue choices shape a lot of your relationships and quest outcomes, but it stops short of romance or loyalty systems. Instead, it affects how your companions respond to different situations, based on what they think of you. If you're on the fence about this one, I'd say go for it if you're into RPGs like Skyrim or Outer Worlds. It's not really trying to reinvent the wheel, but what's here feels solid and well put together. Let's move on to another game called Blue Prince, a roguelike puzzle game built around a simple, but not straightforward goal. Find room 46 inside a mansion that reconfigures itself with every run. You start as Simon P. Jones, arriving at a mysterious estate left to him in a will, but the catch is that the layout shifts constantly, and you've only got a limited number of steps each day to figure out where everything is. Each run starts in the entrance hall, and from there, you're choosing new rooms from a random hand of options, placing them onto the map one by one. But the doors still have to connect, so the whole thing starts to play out like a map you're piecing together, one room at a time. Some rooms contain clues or puzzles, others have food to extend your daily steps, and a few will lock you out entirely unless you bring the right tools. There's no combat or threats, it's all just about planning ahead, managing risk, and learning how the mansion behaves across multiple runs, because most of the information is fragmented in the form of letters, numbers, and environmental hints. And it leans heavily on long-term memory and note-taking. And some puzzles don't make sense until days later, and it's common to revisit the same room with new context and suddenly realize what it was for. You'll also unlock permanent upgrades along the way in the form of more starting steps, better gear, and extra information. But most of the satisfaction naturally comes from just cracking the puzzles. So if you're up for some note-taking, head-scratching, and the occasional sanity check, Blue Prince is one of the more clever games to drop this year. Next up is South of Midnight, an action-adventure game that delivers stylized movement, magical combat, and regional folklore. You play as Hazel Flood, a teenager searching for her missing mother in a sort of twisted and decaying version of the American South. Along the way, she discovers she's a weaver, someone that's able to manipulate and repair the world around her. The combat's less about pulling off fast combos and more about spacing, control, and picking your moment. You've got this spectral hook to pull enemies in, a shockwave to knock them back, and magical effects that interrupt or slow down movements. Hazel can glide, double jump, and wall run, and the levels are shaped to encourage careful navigation rather than constant flow. You'll also find optional paths that's often tied to puzzle elements or traversal tricks using her weaver abilities, like rebuilding broken terrain or shifting parts of the world back into place. You also have a puppet companion named Crouton who can pull enemy focus or trigger events during combat. He's not the core of the system, but when used well, he gives you extra room to maneuver when things tighten up. So if you're into slower-paced action games that mix movement, puzzles, and story without really holding your hand, South of Midnight is one to keep an eye on.
He's a little close for comfort. Get jammied. You what?
Quick now, get some bullets in here.
Adamfall starts with you waking up in a sealed government bunker, without a map, without a guide, and without much context. Outside is rural Britain in the early 60s, years after a fictional nuclear disaster based on the real Windscale accident. Villages are abandoned, roads are blocked, and the only signs of life are heavily armed patrols, hostile government robots built for combat, or locals who act like something's watching. The game blends slow exploration, light survival systems, and occasional combat that's better avoided unless you're ready. There's also a mechanic tied to your heart rate. So basically, if you run too much, take hits, or stay exposed for too long, your body starts to shut down, vision blurs, sound distorts, and movement gets harder to control. And that's a problem because fights aren't always easy to recover from. So staying hidden is mostly the best option. You don't work with a checklist of quests here, but instead, you'll move through connected zones by chasing small leads. It may be a note on a wall, a scratched-out sign, or a voice on the radio, and half the time, it's unclear if what you found is useful or not. You'll occasionally find tools that help you go further, like extra inventory space, upgrades that support stealth, or modifiers that delay stress buildup. But most of what you're collecting is knowledge, how the world works and who still controls it. If you like slow-burn games where paying attention matters more than following markers, Atom Fall sticks to that all the way through.
Firing!
Where? Take...
Next up is Stellar Blade, a third-person action game built around timing, reactions, and precision. You play as Eve, a soldier sent to a ruined Earth after an alien race called the Naytiba wiped out most of humanity. Combat is tight and skill-based. You'll need to read enemy patterns, dodge or parry with the right timing, and punish openings with quick counters. If you get it right, you charge a beta gauge that unlocks stronger attacks to break guards or interrupt tougher enemies. Miss the timing, and you usually take a big hit or end up back on the defensive. You expand Eve's toolkit through skill trees, unlocking new counters, stronger recovery, or options that help with spacing and crowd control. There's no level scaling or loot grind, so you're locked into the tools you choose, which helps your playstyle feel more defined. Apart from combat, you'll also run into side quests, hidden upgrades, and optional paths that pull you off the main route. Some spots are clearly built for combat, but there's also quieter stretches where you dig through ruins or pick up bits of story from the environment. It doesn't throw a lot of bloated systems or side content that goes nowhere. The main focus is on the combat, learning patterns, reacting fast, and pulling off clean counters. When you screw up, it hurts, but when you nail it, it feels damn good. And we round this one up with a game called Look Outside, a survival horror RPG that takes place almost entirely inside a lockdown apartment complex. You play as a guy called Sam, one of the few people who hasn't gone insane or transformed after some unknown event outside started changing people. The basic rule is simple: don't open the windows and definitely don't look out. The building works like a hub. You explore it floor by floor, room by room, and each section has its own set of hazards: locked doors, survivors, blocked passages, and enemies tucked into tight, claustrophobic spaces. Most of your time is spent scavenging for supplies, crafting tools, and deciding how far you can push before things start to spiral. There's a time system too, but it only moves when you explore new areas or take certain actions, and when it does, the environment shifts, items go missing, enemies get more aggressive, and some characters vanish entirely. Combat is turn-based, but it's rare and risky. You can equip melee weapons or makeshift tools, but most of them break after a few uses, and healing is limited. And if you avoid combat entirely, you'll have to rely more on distractions or planning routes to avoid enemies altogether. There's also cooking, crafting, and hygiene systems, and it's not really just filler content because they affect your stats and sanity. Small things like what you eat or whether you've slept can actually change how certain events play out. If you're into games that keep things tight and make every decision feel risky, I'd say Look Outside is worth checking out. And that's all I had this time. Hopefully at least one or two of these stood out, and if not, well, you've still made it this far, so that's something. Either way, thanks for watching, and if you end up trying any of these out, let me know how it goes. I've got more stuff on the way, so stick around if that sounds like your kind of thing. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.